Can you believe that we are just 2 days away from the Nintendo Switch 2? I decided to make a video 2 days before it came out because, you know, the number 2. God, I'm like Two-Face. I'm obsessed with the number 2. But I didn't feel like talking more about the Switch 2 today. I feel like I've already said enough about the system, and at this point, we're just all waiting for it to come out, and it's coming out real soon here. But before we transition over to a new generation of Nintendo, I want to talk about the system that pretty much changed everything for the company, the Nintendo Switch. Is it in frame? Yeah, the Nintendo Switch. You can actually see me. Oh my god. I really need to clean up my screen too. There we go. It's a little better. It's not better at all. Yes, the Nintendo Switch with my favorite pair of Joy-Cons, the Skyward Sword ones. I'm looking at the monitor, just I can't stop looking at it. It's a glorious piece of tech. You know, it's easy to forget that the Switch was a revolutionary console just because everyone has one. Everyone knows what the Switch is at this point. But back when it was announced in 2016, it changed everything. For one, this was really the first console of its kind. I'm not sure if there was like a niche product that let you do the same thing that Switch did, but this was really the first kind of console that really popularized this sort of handheld, but with, you know, console level graphics. And the build up to the announcement of this thing was just insane. Like, if you were a Nintendo fan on the internet since 2015, you would know that people wouldn't stop talking about the so-called NX ever since Nintendo unofficially announced it, or I guess officially in this case, announced that they were working on a new platform called the NX. And this was only 3, maybe 2.5 years into their last console's life cycle, the Wii U, which, as we know, as much as I love the system, it was a colossal failure for Nintendo. It only sold 13 million units in its 4-year lifespan, and Nintendo already had to jump ship from it and figure out what their next platform was going to be, and that became the Nintendo Switch. I think a lot of us were expecting the NX to be a more traditional device, you know, akin to a PS4 or Xbox One, that they were just going to make a system like those, but they didn't. Nintendo stayed weird, and it paid off for them in spades. Yes, it was using underpowered tech, a Tegra X1, which wasn't a very powerful SoC. It was impressive for what it was. People really thought this thing was going to fail. And even after the Nintendo Switch presentation in January, people were still kind of miffed on the whole thing. Like, Zelda looked cool, but that was about it. The launch lineup, except for Zelda, was not very impressive, and the prices of the accessories were expensive. Interesting how history repeats itself, am I right? Little did we know that that small launch lineup was all Nintendo needed to get the ball rolling. Breath of the Wild was a revolutionary game, and I'll be talking more about that a little later, but we all know how everything turned out from here. Just in the first year, the Nintendo Switch outsold the Wii U, which, to be fair, is a pretty low bar. But now here we are, 8 years later after the console launched, and it's the 3rd best-selling system of all time, just below the Nintendo DS and the PlayStation 2. And when I bought the Switch, I was leaving my house all the time. I was going to work, I was going to school, I was going to my girlfriend, now wife's house all the time, so I was hardly home. I was barely playing my PC, my PS4, or my Xbox, which then made the Switch my primary console for a long time, for a couple years in fact. In a sense, the Switch was a perfect console for an older gamer. I say older, but I was like in my early 20s at the time. But you know, my older friends who were like in their 30s and 40s with families really appreciated the design of the Switch. It was just a convenient platform to play on for a busy working adult. It's fascinating talking about this now because it's really easy for me to forget just how much this system has changed my gaming life and my career. Like, I was covering this thing when it was called the NX back on the YouTube channel Commonwealth Realm, where me and the founder Conrad just teamed up on videos reporting on the news of the Nintendo Switch, the upcoming games, and everyone was so interested, so obsessed, I would say, in what the NX was, and then later what the Switch would be. Everyone was so locked in on the Switch, and it showed in our YouTube views. Heck, a lot of Nintendo YouTubers that you know today got famous because of the hype of the Switch. The Switch hype was so insane. There's the Switch 2 hype now, but you know, it's not nearly as insane now as it was back when the Switch was coming out, partly because the Switch was a new device with a new concept. People were so fascinated by it. Especially coming off of the Wii U, people were just starving for something good from Nintendo, and they got just that with the Nintendo Switch. Make no mistake, the Switch was indeed a revolution, with many people considering it to be like the best Nintendo console of all time, not just because of the sheer amount of great first-party games that came out for it, but especially with the classic games library, which is continuing on the Switch 2 with GameCube games, but here we get NES, Super NES, Nintendo 64, even Sega Genesis games for some reason. And on one hand, I'm conflicted because I wish we could just own these games outright. We wouldn't have to pay an annual fee just to play them, but at the same time, it's still really good to have that library. Now, please let us turn those borders off, for the love of God, Nintendo. Why do I have to look at these? But earlier, before I got sidetracked again, I was saying that this console pretty much changed my career. I was doing Commonwealth Realm for a couple of years there. I'm actually back at Commonwealth Realm doing videos there, so be sure to subscribe. But then I was able to get a job at GameXplain, further covering the Nintendo Switch and making a full-time wage off of it. I just can't stress enough how important the Switch was to my life and my career, which is why I owe it this video. I owe it a solid farewell before I move on to the Nintendo Switch 2. And you know, I'm also not even going to trade this in. I'm gonna keep it, mainly because, you know, I have a son who's turning 4 next year, and I want to like give him a console to play on. That'll be his Switch while I have my Switch 2. Of course, I'll still share the Switch 2 with him. Everybody calm down. But yeah, I don't want to get rid of this thing. It's just too important for me to trade in at GameStop or what have you. But at the same time though, the Switch is not exactly ending per se. There's still going to be games coming out for it this year, even a bunch of third-party stuff as shown in the last Nintendo Directs, the one before the Switch 2 one. There's Metroid Prime 4, there's Pokemon Legends ZA, and then the next year we even have a new Rhythm Heaven and Tomodachi Life coming out on the Switch 1. Surely there will be Switch 2 editions of these games. Maybe not Rhythm Heaven, I don't think it needs the extra power of the Switch 2 to be great, but it makes sense, right? Nintendo can't just stop supporting the Switch 1 cold turkey and tell everyone to buy a Switch 2. Over 150 million people own a Switch 1, and they're still going to be playing on their Switch 1, either because they couldn't get a Switch 2 or because they don't even want a Switch 2 yet. But before I officially say goodbye to my Switch, I want to talk about some of the games that really left an impression on me these past 8 years. Of course, I'm a big Metroid guy, and the Switch was very kind in that regard to give me not one, but 2 Metroid games. Metroid Dread finally came out after, 19 years of waiting for a new addition to the 2D Metroid timeline, and I was shocked to find out that it would become my favorite 2D Metroid game. You know, I didn't think it was going to outdo Super Metroid or Metroid Fusion, but it did. The controls in it were so good, the story was fascinating, it closed the 2D Metroid story arc. I played that game 3 times in a row when it came out, and I'm overdue for like a full replay of that game. Also, fun fact, I reviewed it for GameXplain, and my quote from my review is in the American Accolades trailer. That's just a humble brag right there. It's not humble at all. I'm bragging so hard right now. Then there's Metroid Prime Remastered, a complete visual overhaul of my favorite game of all time and one of the best games of all time. Not only that, but it really is one of the best remasters of all time. It's completely made the original game obsolete for me. It just looks so good. I really hope Prime 2 and 3 get a similar remaster treatment at some point this year, or maybe even after Prime 4 comes out, but I just really love what they did here with Metroid Prime Remastered, and if you haven't played it yet, what is wrong with you? It's only $40, or you could wait for a sale. No shame in doing that. Moving on from the Metroid stuff, I also got to talk about Kirby and the Forgotten Land. I don't care for Kirby. It's not one of my favorite game franchises. I've never really cared about that pink puffball, but then I heard how good Kirby and the Forgotten Land was, and I decided, okay, I guess I'll jump in and see what all the fuss is about. It's amazing. It's so good. It's one of the best 3D platformers on the Nintendo Switch. It's so crazy how people have been begging for like a true 3D Kirby game, and then not only becomes like the highest I think it's like the highest rated Kirby game, I could be wrong, but it's definitely the best selling Kirby game. You see what happens when you give people what they want, Nintendo. It's so good. I'm also overdue for a replay of this because there's some things I've forgotten about it, but I will definitely check it out on Switch 2, especially when it gets that Star-Crossed World expansion in August. And this next game took me completely by surprise, Luigi's Mansion 3. I was shocked at how much I loved this game. Not only does it have like the perfect Halloween vibes, but also visually it's a stunner with animation that even rivals the Super Mario Bros. Movie. I know I've gushed a lot about the visuals, but trust me, the gameplay is where it's at, especially with Guigi, who makes for some creative puzzles. This whole game is just so creative, and I love it for that. I think we all knew that game was going to be good, right? But I don't think we expected it to be that good. But of course, you can't can't have Luigi without having Mario, and that's where I gotta talk about Super Mario Odyssey. What a fantastic 3D platformer. Every time I play it, I just wonder why no other 3D platformer controls as well as this does. Mario just moves with such finesse and grace, and the cappy mechanic is also just incredibly creative, having you take control of just about every enemy in the Mario franchise. Wowzers. But the final game I have to talk about, you know the one. It's The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. This game was just very impactful for me. Like the way I've been obsessing about Metroid Prime 4 for 8 years, I obsessed about this game for only like 3 years. That wait felt like forever when I was a teenager / young adult, but yes, Breath of the Wild occupied my heart, mind, and soul for such a long time, and to finally have it release alongside the Nintendo Switch was just a moment I'll never forget in video games. Like, yeah, this game took a lot of liberties. It made a lot of un-Zelda-like choices in it, like the way the dungeons were designed, the way the item progression is practically non-existent, and the story took a backseat to the gameplay. This is part of what makes the game kind of controversial in the Zelda community. As you could tell, I don't really have that much of a problem with it, as much as I do with Tears of the Kingdom, but I can go back and revisit Breath of the Wild and just get transported back to when I finally played this game. The Great Plateau, one of the best opening areas of all time, and then just exploring that world, it just felt so rich and so full of life. I feel like Breath of the Wild is worth the hype. Like, you can't possibly say it's overrated, because it's just, I think it is rated perfectly. Just talking about it makes me want to play it again. And I know you're probably thinking, but how can I gush about this game when I constantly complain about the new Zelda formula, especially in Tears of the Kingdom? Well, I forgive Breath of the Wild for a lot more of its faults because it was trying something new, not just for Zelda, but for open world gaming as a whole. And I was kind of hoping Tears of the Kingdom would come in and fix some of those problems, but it just didn't. In fact, it doubled down on a lot of Breath of the Wild's flaws. The menus are worse, the story is worse, and to top it all off, it's just the same map as Breath of the Wild, but with a couple of islands in the sky and an underwhelming depths. I honestly would have forgiven it more if it was set in a brand new open world, because the exploration was what made Breath of the Wild special to me, and just re-exploring that same world with a few differences just was super underwhelming for me. I still enjoyed what I played of it. I thought the final boss was miles ahead of Breath of the Wild's final boss, but when I finished the main story in Tears of the Kingdom, I just stopped playing. I was like, okay, I've had my time with it. It's fine. It's not anything incredible. But in the end, I just hope the next Zelda game improves upon the flaws of Tears of the Kingdom. But in the meantime, I'll just look at Breath of the Wild like it's my baby. So in the end, I have to wish the Nintendo Switch, this thing right here, a heartfelt farewell. And I have to thank it for all the years that it's given me, playing great games, just with unique experiences. And yeah, I love you. But let me know in the comments, are you still holding on to your Nintendo Switch 1, or did you already trade it in for Switch 2? And also, give me some of your favorite Nintendo Switch games. I'd love to talk about games with you. That's why I have this channel, right? Just to talk about games. And I also have to thank my beautiful Ferris Wheel members right here for supporting me and my endeavors. If you want to have early access to uploads like this one, then consider becoming a Ferris Wheel member. But I will see you all when the Switch 2 comes out. Have fun.